Welcome to Untold Lores. The Crimson Wedding Invitation, Part 2 of 4. Li Wei recognized every face in the crowd of wedding guests, and each recognition hit him like a physical blow to the chest. There was old Chen, the village blacksmith who had died in a fire 3 years ago, his skin still bearing the ghostly marks of burns. Beside him stood little Ping, a child who had succumbed to fever during the harsh winter 5 years past, her cheeks still flushed with an unnatural fever glow. Mrs. Wang, who had fallen down her well, stood with water perpetually dripping from her funeral robes. As Li Wei's eyes swept across the gathering, he saw his own uncle, his former teacher, the village doctor, all people who had passed away in recent years, all now standing in perfect formation as wedding guests. Their eyes, when they turned toward him, reflected the moonlight like polished jade, and their smiles were too wide, too knowing. A figure emerged from the pavilion's main entrance, dressed in elaborate red and gold wedding robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. It was Mei Ling, but not as she had been in life. Her beauty was ethereal and terrible, her skin pale as moonbeams, her hair adorned with flowers that looked real until you noticed they were carved from bone. She moved with impossible grace, her feet not quite touching the ground as she glided toward him. When she spoke, her voice carried the sound of water lapping at pond edges, a sound that had haunted Li Wei's nightmares for 15 years. "You came," she said, and her smile was both welcoming and predatory. "I knew you would remember your promise." Li Wei's mouth went dry as fragments of memory began to surface. Childhood games by the pond, innocent promises made between friends, words spoken in the careless way of youth. He had promised to attend her wedding someday, to dance at her celebration, to be happy for her when she found love. The dead, it seemed, took promises very seriously indeed. Mei Ling extended her hand toward him, and he could see that her fingernails had grown long and sharp, more like claws than proper nails. "Come," she whispered. "The ceremony must begin. The groom is waiting." She gestured toward the pavilion, and through the golden light streaming from within, Li Wei caught glimpse of a figure in bridegroom's robes. His heart nearly stopped when he realized the figure had no face, just smooth skin where features should have been. The ghostly guests began to move in unison, forming two lines that created a pathway leading directly to the pavilion entrance. Their movements were synchronized with eerie precision, like a choreographed dance they had rehearsed for eternity. Li Wei found himself walking between them, though he couldn't remember deciding to move. Each step felt like walking through thick mud, and the air around him grew heavier with each passing moment. As he approached the pavilion, he could hear the wedding guests beginning to chant in voices that harmonized in impossible ways, creating music that seemed to come from the earth itself. The words were in an ancient dialect he didn't recognize, but somehow he understood their meaning. They were calling for a union, a binding, a completion of something that had been left unfinished. Inside the pavilion, red candles burned with flames that cast no heat, and the air shimmered with what looked like falling cherry blossoms, but felt like ash against his skin. The faceless groom turned toward them as they entered, and Li Wei realized with growing horror that he could see his own reflection in the smooth expanse where the creature's face should have been. Mei Ling took her place beside the groom, and both turned to look at Li Wei expectantly. "You're not just a guest," Mei Ling said, her voice now carrying undertones of rushing water and distant thunder. "You're here to complete the promise. You're here to take your rightful place." The ghostly guests filed in behind him, and Li Wei realized that the entrance had vanished. Where the doorway had been, there was now only solid wall. The pavilion had become a trap, and he was caught inside with creatures that wore the faces of everyone he had ever mourned. Mei Ling's next words made Li Wei's blood freeze. "The groom you see before you is just a placeholder. You are meant to be my husband for eternity." That's it for Part 2. Follow Untold Lores for Part 3. Like and subscribe for daily stories.